Yesterday, didn't I mention being in Shenzhen? I had already arrived in Guangzhou and stayed one night. Guangzhou is quite close to Shenzhen. The next day, we passed through a difficult border crossing. The border crossing was somewhat difficult. On June 15th, we crossed the border at Shenzhen. There's a place in Shenzhen called Luohu Port. Luohu Port, I remember we crossed there. Then, when heading to Hong Kong, when they were checking our passports, unexpectedly, complications arose. The customs officers started saying it seemed to be going smoothly at first, but then one person, he seemed to see something in the passport. They said there was still a problem with this passport. Why? You went to India in 1990. When you left, there was a stamp, but when you returned, there was no stamp. This is illegal. What he said was actually correct. Indeed, when we went to India, on the way there, we crossed the border from Lhasa. When returning, we were with His Holiness Penor Rinpoche. I wrote about this in the latter part of Recollection of the Time Gone By, because at that time in Nepal, if you wanted to go to another country, you could do so legally by paying a small fee. At that time, we were with His Holiness Penor Rinpoche and his group. They were going to perform in Hong Kong the Vajra dance depicting the life of Guru Rinpoche. We had a lot of things with us. They said if we got a temporary passport, it would be more convenient. So when we were returning, there was a white one from there. We had a green one. That was the real passport. We carried this white passport at that time from Nepal to Hong Kong, then from Hong Kong back to Chengdu, from Hong Kong to Guangzhou, Guangzhou to Chengdu. But at this time, the stamps were all in the Hong Kong passport. So indeed, in this passport, according to international regulations, when you leave, you need a stamp. When you return, you need a stamp. At this time, it was actually quite reasonable. We wanted to transport some Buddha statues, so we got a temporary passport. This kind of thing was very common. Everyone did it this way, but no matter what we said, those people were relentless, insisting they would report it. We thought if they reported it, it could be very troublesome. But in the end, they took us to a room and kept us there. They themselves came and went, making phone calls. And actually, when we travel abroad, we often encounter this. Once from Hangzhou or somewhere, the luggage had already gone through, the luggage had already flown to another country, but I, the person, came back and couldn't go. There were situations like that too. At that time, we were confined in a room. His Holiness was sitting on a slightly higher chair. We requested His Holiness to bestow blessings, otherwise this time might be difficult. His Holiness later said that when he was in Bhutan before, Protector Red Tsen Dasi U Marpo told him that at critical moments, if he called upon him, he would come immediately. Then His Holiness thought that now was indeed a critical moment. At that time, he prayed to Guru Rinpoche, King Geza, and the Protector deity. We saw the Master there silently reciting something, continuously gazing in one direction. After a while, those customs officers came in, and their attitude had greatly changed. They said, although your situation is quite complex, we still agree to let you pass. Actually, there were some other things in this process, but we felt that suddenly there was a great change. We felt it might be the Master's blessing or the Protector deity's blessing, we don't know. We thought that we might not make it this time because if you can't leave the country, it's very easy. When you're there, if they want to let you go, they can find many excuses to let you pass. If they don't want to anywhere, they can say the higher-ups disagree or there's a problem here or there. It's still the same now. Same. If some leaders above want to find fault with you, they can find problems anywhere. If it's more convenient for you, even if there are some violations, they can overlook them. But somehow, inconceivably, they suddenly let us go. Their attitude before was very, very stern. Besides, we didn't pull any other strings. We had no way. We just waited. His Holiness just recited something like that. Then we smoothly passed through Luohu Port. Now, when we often see this place, we remember the feeling of that moment. After leaving Shenzhen, we took a car to Hong Kong and stayed at the Paliul Center again, His Holiness Penor Rinpoche's center, for one night. The next morning, regarding the prayers recited when passing through customs earlier, he had me write them down. When translated, the content of what His Holiness said was this. At the border between Shenzhen and Hong Kong, when the passport was being checked, I felt somewhat uneasy in my heart. In my experience, I saw Guru Rinpoche, King Giza, and Protector Red Sen. In his experience, he beheld them there. At that time, we didn't know, but His Holiness had already seen Guru Rinpoche and King Geza. Actually, sometimes when we encounter critical moments, if these three don't all come, even one coming is still helpful, we feel. His Holiness prayed like this: the three secret qualities of all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, in infinite pure realms, are embodied in you. In your presence, O Padmasambhava, to you I devotedly pray. Grant blessings so all our wishes will be spontaneously fulfilled. This is a prayer to Padmasambhava. Your wisdom, compassion, and power have reached perfection. You lovingly care for the beings of the snowland as your only children. You, the wormer of accomplishment, please look upon us and grant blessings so that all our aims may be easily accomplished. This is for the war god King Geza. Generally, the war god King Geza, we ask him to look upon us so our matters go smoothly. Your compassionate response to supplication is swifter than lightning. Your way of enacting entrustment is more powerful than a thunderbolt. Yaksha Tsiu Marpo, King Enemy Subduer, destroy all negative forces and obstacles immediately. This is calling upon Protector Red Sen. He is very swift, faster than lightning, and once you entrust him, his power is also swifter than heavenly thunderbolts. Protector Red Sen, you must dispel these enemy kings right now, especially Guru Rinpoche and King Geza also bestowed their blessings. But more importantly, I think Protector Red Sen at that time indeed came forth and eliminated these obstacles and hindrances. When praying with such devotion, the fearful delusive appearances dissolved into the Dharma Dhatu. At this time, His Holiness's state of realization, all these fears and delusions dissolved into the Dharma Dhatu. All self-grasping and deity-grasping, one's own grasping and deity-grasping, dissolved into the referent-free Dharmakaya realm. Ngawang Lodro Tsongme wrote down this prayer at the residence of Drubwang Pema Norbu on the morning of the following day. Drubwang Pema Norbu refers to His Holiness Penor Rinpoche. Drubwang Pema Norbu, Drubwang Rinpoche. That is to say, at His Holiness Penor Rinpoche's hermitage, these words were written down. During our stay in Hong Kong, Khenpo Namdrol gave me a yellow shirt. Khenpo Namdrol gave me a yellow shirt and a donka, saying they were brought from India. The quality of Indian cloth is very good. These two pieces of clothing, I've been wearing them since going abroad. They've been through many empowerments and teachings by His Holiness. I've developed an emotional attachment to these clothes. Now I've worn them for 30 years and the quality is still very good. So when I looked at this text just now to express the auspicious connection, today I also put on these two pieces of clothing, the yellow shirt inside and this donka outside. Many Dharma friends probably can't see it now, but later when watching the video, or we'll see. Anyway, every time I travel, I always bring these pieces of clothing. Wasn't it Marpa Lotsawa? He wore rather tattered clothes. Some disciples said to him, aren't you quite wealthy? Why do you dress so shabbily? He said, when I was seeking the Dharma in India, Naropa and the others, when giving me the Hevajra empowerment, I was wearing these clothes. So my clothes carry my master's blessings, so I don't want to change them. I'm also just pretending to emulate them. Anyway, they still haven't faded much. Every time I travel, I also bring them. Perhaps this is a kind of attachment. Some people might think everything is illusory like a dream. Yet you're attached to two pieces of clothing, old clothes. What's so special about that? Perhaps this is a kind of faith. Anyway, sometimes I insert here whatever comes to mind, writing wherever I think of, because these things did indeed happen. And if these things really happened, I'll write them down here in passing. Especially for Tibetan people, this style of writing may not be very customary. For Tibetan people, just now Lerab Lingpa said these are things we don't understand, very humbly. Speaking this way is more customary. Originally, Recollection of the Time Gone By was written primarily in Chinese, but later it was translated, and I had no choice. So perhaps the styles of different ethnicities indeed have different mentalities. But nowadays it seems Western culture has basically impacted the entire globe, so perhaps there are similarities with minor differences. This was the 16th, the next day. This was the day in Hong Kong. Then the next day I see the 15th. Actually, our schedule was quite tight at that time. When you all finish studying this, you'll be able to see. The next day, this chapter is called Flying Over the Pacific Ocean. In the era when His Holiness traveled abroad, the relationships between countries were not as open as they are now. I should say that we were the first group of Tibetans to go directly from Tibetan areas to America. I wonder if I'm exaggerating in many ways, but I don't think so. Those who went from Nepal, India, and other places were probably many. But those of us who went directly should be considered relatively few. In the 1980s, at the very beginning, we heard about Hawaii in America. We heard that America was quite hot in summer. At that time, I also prepared some clothes for His Holiness and bought some rather nice suitcases. Compared to many aspects of our last trip to India, because last time our bags didn't look very good, now we had more experience in traveling abroad, so the suitcases were a bit better. Moreover, this time the tsampa and butter we brought and some other things, we brought relatively little of these. We did bring some. Then on June 16th, we flew 4 hours from Hong Kong and arrived at Tokyo International Airport, 4 hours. Actually, the timing then compared to now has some slight differences in places, but I didn't change it. In my records at that time, this is how I recorded it, so now perhaps some things have slight differences. The Japanese airport, my feeling at that time was that it was truly like a crystal palace, clear and transparent, especially bright. Including on the floor, there wasn't a speck of dust. When walking, when my own reflection appeared in front of me, it felt like I had arrived in heaven. Because before I had been to Bhutan, Nepal and India, but even inside their airports, they were especially rather shabby, a bit better than Africa, not extremely shabby, but Japan, perhaps seeing a developed country for the first time, it felt as if I had already arrived in the Pure Land. But I didn't write Pure Land in my book, afraid others would laugh, but in my heart I thought, is the Pure Land like this? At that time the feeling was like nothing I'd ever had. Later, when I arrived at Tokyo Airport, there wasn't much feeling, not so much, because in 2015, when I went to Europe and to Africa, on the way back, I should have gone to Tokyo. At that time, I stayed in Tokyo for several days, held an Avalokiteshvara Dharma assembly there, and also went to Tokyo University and Waseda University, gave several public lectures there. But at that time, it seemed the feeling was basically similar, without any particularly big difference. His Holiness's stay in Japan wasn't long at that time, but he took time outside the airport. They arranged a reception at a place like a hotel. There were some people studying Tibetan Buddhism and Japanese esoteric Buddhism. Then His Holiness taught them about compassion and wisdom, and then everyone together discussed Buddhism and science. The time was quite short. His Holiness also mentioned that science and Buddhism are indispensable for humanity. Especially science can only satisfy material needs, while the true benefit Buddhism brings to people transcends the entire material world and should bring great benefit to the spirit. If there were no Buddhism blindly pursuing material enjoyment, then many things would be counterproductive. So he also said at that time that Asian countries or other countries, no matter what, whether wealthy people or ordinary citizens, everyone must learn the teachings of Buddhism and receive its nectar. At that time, the people present seemed greatly inspired. From their expressions, from their attitude, it seemed toward His Holiness. When I first started writing, I wrote quite a lot about that experience, but later I didn't write it all. At that time, they said they benefited especially greatly. Later, those who received His Holiness's blessing at that time, decades later when I met them, they said the feeling of meeting His Holiness that one time had never changed. Later, their Buddhist practice was very steadfast. Later we encountered such people. After that we flew from Tokyo to Hawaii in America. His Holiness sat in economy class. Actually, when His Holiness traveled abroad, taking so many flights, now every time I take a flight, I feel I'm unwilling to sit in first class myself because His Holiness never sat in first class even once. It was all economy class. I don't know what the reason was at that time. American planes gave me a somewhat different feeling. They didn't provide free meals. The flight attendants were all middle-aged and elderly people. It felt a bit, well, not like in some other places with young, beautiful people dressed elegantly. It wasn't like that. Basically, the first impression was this, how it was a bit different. When His Holiness took medicine, he needed hot water, so the English I had previously self-studied, hot water, was already put to use. I felt a kind of sense of accomplishment. The plane at that time over the boundless Pacific Ocean kept flying. At the beginning it seemed the sky and sea were one color, such an especially beautiful scene. I felt already intoxicated, especially comfortable. But we kept flying and flying, because at that time we flew for about 7 or 8 hours. After a certain point, it felt sometimes a bit lonely, sometimes desolate, sometimes there was a feeling. But looking at His Holiness, at that time I remember very clearly I was sitting beside His Holiness. Anyway, every time, sometimes when taking flights, there are also some memories in this regard. At that time, His Holiness sometimes looked out the window, not talking much, then holding in his hand this red mala. It should be on the back cover of our journey to the West. That red mala shown there, he held it and recited. Sometimes it seemed like praying, sometimes it seemed like contemplating, but he didn't talk much anyway, just not much. That state of that day, that was also quite special. We flew for 7 hours. Look now, some people from Shanghai to Beijing, from Chengdu to Shanghai, 2 or 3 hours, and they feel, wow, so tired. Actually, we sat for 4 or 5 hours before, then here we sat for 7 hours. His Holiness's physical condition at that time was still for the benefit of sentient beings. In some ways, indeed, people who have taken flights all feel it's not simple. People who often travel abroad are fine, but people whose health is not very good, to sit on a plane for such a long time, this is also not easy. We finally arrived at Honolulu International Airport in Hawaii. All right then, Hawaii is such a beautiful place. In the book, perhaps next, going through customs again. We'll talk about it in a few days. All right, that's all for today.
Bandara Badma Sodargye Bandara Badma Sodargye Bandara Badma Sodargye